Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the last session for today, where our presenter will talk about Anthropic's Claude in Amazon Bedrock, powering innovation and understanding what's possible with generative AI. This session is a level 200, and in this session, you will learn more about Anthropic Claude in Amazon Bedrock. Please join me in welcoming onto the stage Ben, our head of marketing for AI and startups for APJ from AWS, followed by Eric from Anthropic.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Last session of the day. I'm not sure if that's good or bad, but we'll try and close it with a little bit of a bang. I'm really looking forward to talking about something that I'm very passionate about. One of the joys of working with AI and startups, especially now and in this space, is I spend a lot of my time talking to customers, working through agentic problems at the moment, thinking about security, data, where in the loop you want to sit in that framework. And over the next 30 minutes, we're going to explore with my friend Eric from Anthropic a number of the iterations around enterprise agentic technology, look at MCP to a little bit more depth, and thinking about a little bit deeper about what does it actually mean to deploy this in the real term. So, that's the schedule. I assume you all have relatively well reading competency. And so the things that I'm going to index into from my point of view is looking a little bit further ahead. And the thing that I'm excited about is as we look forward, the partnership between AWS and Anthropic is super strong because it doesn't just provide our customers the ability to deploy the latest models, but as those models evolve, it's a very easy and seamless way of accessing the latest frontier models that will power agentic technology going forward. And for me, and the concept that I'll come back to you at the end of this topic around is, we understand to some degree what agentic technology on agents can do today. However, the agents being done or executed today are using the foundational frontier models of today. What is possible in the next 3, 6, 12, or 18 months is the thing that we can't even think about. And so the architectural structures of multi-agent, hyper-personalization, data, and all of these components need to be thought about in the mental models of today to build the structures of tomorrow. So, you should always start with a quote. It's a bit of a suck-up quote to have Bezos up there, but I like it. The concept of an AI assistant and the idea that they're there for us, the concept of how do I manage change management within my organization? How are the employees going to listen and understand, adopt, incorporate? How am I thinking about the organizational structures in a hybrid fashion of where humans and agentic technology play together? These are all relatively complex, but we are on a curve. And there's some awesome research that Aura and IDC were talking about around where we are on that curve today. And obviously, everything at a certain point when you're working with analysts is a level of prediction. But what I like to think about is data at its core is at the heart of the frameworks that you leverage that give you a differentiation when it comes to either generative AI or agentic technology. However, the elements that make it complete is trust. You have to trust. You have to see the observability. You have to understand the deltas between the performance of a human and an agent. You need to understand where in the loop you are comfortable from a policy point of view, from your organization, from government. There are a number of areas where you can think about, if I was to build hyper-personalization and I had a speech-to-speech model, how would it feel if I had an agent speak to a human, listen to the tonality of their voice, and respond in a more empathetic tone? What constrains that? What binds that? What are the areas that I need to be considering when I build out that structure? And then finally, from a technology point of view, you need to be thinking about how you're building multi-agents. How do tools like Bedrock Agent, how do these areas enable you to deploy these, and how will they evolve as you structure in future? One of the anecdotes that some of my customers talk to me about is, once I have 200, 400, 500 agents, do I need an agent for HR? How do they talk to each other? Who's on the top, who's on the bottom? Who makes the decisions? These structures can be quite complex. So, talking about demystifying complexity, I'm going to share a really brief 90-second demo that for me, there's a customer I work with in Korea who works in a gaming technology company. And they talk a lot about how they are using agents today to interpret the telemetry they get and actually drive faster, effective, and safe outcomes with a human in the loop. So I'll just start this, it'll take 90 seconds. but hopefully it gives you a little bit more insight. No, I got a couple more slides. How are we doing? Yeah, easy. So that was a really short example of agentic technology, but the element that I like is the emphasis on the human in the loop, and the concept that there are areas where you still will always want to maintain control. And as we automate tedious or mundane tasks, the humans and the managers in the organization are still required to ensure that you're making the right outcomes at the right points. So, obviously this is a talk about both Anthropic and AWS and how we work better together. And when I think about how the power of scaling models and the recently released Sonnet 4, Opus 4, the impressive ways in which they're developing the code and the code creation and the code analysis, when I think about the partnership, the fact that the work that Anthropic and AWS do together around Trainium 2 and building the most optimized models going forward, that's really exciting because for me it means that using custom silicon like Trainium 2 or Inferentia and partnering with Anthropic will continue to get better as we look forward. And then finally, the idea that as we partner and build customer outcomes, the work together will result in better outcomes for customers. And then finally, when I think about that cloud environment, I realistically, when I talk to customers, emphasize that from the use case to the POC to production to scale, the infrastructure and the underlying basement is there with AWS and Anthropic to scale lots of our customers' use cases. And to do that with security and responsibility across both platforms is very important. So with that all being said, I'm going to welcome on the stage my good friend Eric from Anthropic, who's going to do a little bit more about MCP and some of the more deep dive elements. Thank you, Eric.
Thank you, mate. All right, I'm excited to tell you more about Model Context Protocol and building agents. So we've talked a lot about MCP, but I had the privilege of working on the MCP product team at Anthropic, and I thought I'd rewind all the way back to the genesis of the idea and how we got there, what problem we were trying to solve. In the bad old days, when you wanted to integrate an LLM with a bunch of remote APIs, you had to build an entire connection layer between the wrapper around your LLM and then the remote APIs, and it was very brittle and very purpose-built, and it wasn't transferable. And so we came up with this protocol to address this challenge. And if you take one thing away from this slide, it's that there are two main actors in the MCP equation. There are MCP servers. These are a thin layer wrapped around the place that has the data. And there are MCP clients, and these are layers wrapped around the LLM, and the LLM wants access to the data. So I know this is a bit of an inversion of the classic sort of client-server paradigm, but again, the servers have the data, the clients want the data. And as I mentioned before, we were starting in a world of fragmented development, and this was really hampering, from our perspective, the ability of the AI industry to accelerate towards a more connected world. And so the models were getting very, very smart, but our ability to plug them into real systems, to get the right context into them at the right time, was hampered by this lack of standards. And so we thought there must be a better way. So we figured out all of the core primitives that we needed in order to be able to expose the capabilities of different types of servers, and in particular be able to teach the clients about what sorts of things they could do with those servers. And in effect, the remote data sets became tools that can be invoked by the LLM in the course of tool use. And so this was sort of an on-ramp for data integrations into the world of LLMs using lots and lots of tools and being able to pick the right ones. And the great thing about the sort of standards progression is that we went from a bright idea to a couple of partners that picked it up, to then Block adopting it, the US financial technology company, and then in very short order, a matter of months it seems like, Google and our friends at OpenAI all picked up the standard. And now that we've overcome this sort of lack of standardization in the industry for how to connect LLMs with these data sources and these running systems and the real-time information they have, now we can move on to more exciting things like building agents together. So those of you who joined us this morning for the keynote may recognize this slide again, but for those who didn't, I will cover it again. We think that there are three main pillars of what make for safe, trustworthy enterprise agents. And the first pillar is you must have the smartest models. There's a long way to go in making sure that the models even have sufficient intelligence to comprehend the task that they're facing, to be able to make the right decisions. And so we believe that to build effective agents, you should be using the absolute smartest models you can get your hands on. And today that's Claude 4 Opus and Claude 4 Sonnet. So the first pillar is the smartest models. The second pillar, which depends on MCP, is interconnections with all the systems that store the data that let you make good decisions. The last thing that you want is a model to be hallucinating its plan, no matter how smart it is, in response to the environment that it perceives around it. And so grounding the model's decision making in the right data sets. This means every enterprise system that could possibly inform the right decision for the agent. In the same way that you would expect, say, a junior employee who's onboarding, if they're going to make a decision and take an action based on that decision, they should be accessing information that informs that decision and not kind of guessing at it. And so if you have the smartest models and you have the right access to information, the next step is to make sure that they are safe and trustworthy. And this is Anthropic's specialty. It's our focus on safety and intelligence, on model alignment, on sort of the defense in depth of every opportunity we have, from the pre-training corpus, to the reinforcement learning training, to the alignment, to the guardrails, to the types of refusals that we do when we're getting the wrong inputs. All of these things are oriented towards maximizing safety. And so we believe that Anthropic has the smartest, safest models to power agents. And thanks to our innovation on MCP, we believe that we've added the critical third pillar of being able to connect them with data. So just to, I guess, for the nth time here, to redefine agents. They're basically systems that work in steps and use tools, and they observe their environment, and they use intelligence to figure out what to do next. And this is the key. They're not following a workflow. It's not a predefined flowchart. It is a sequence of problem-solving steps based on observations of the world and based on the real data. And so this forms what we call the agentic loop. And the agentic loop is basically making a plan, executing the plan, or at least the first step of it, and then observing the environment and reflecting on it, and updating the plan if necessary, and then choosing the next step to take. And so the thing that distinguishes a chatbot, which you start with a prompt and it gives you a response, fundamentally sort of a passive arrangement, from an agent, which is much more active, is that agents accept a directive. It's an instruction to do something, and they deliver you an outcome, which is that they've changed the world state in some way. Maybe they've issued a refund. Maybe they've created some code and deployed it. The effect here is that they have done something that didn't exist before, that is not just a new work product, it's a modification of the world around them. So there are lots of different things we can do with agents, from the simple to the complex. So some of the simplest things are, taking an action on a customer's behalf. And some of the most complex things are, for example, ingesting a whole lot of structured data, and then writing some code to process that structured data into a new derivative data set. And then finally, to help visualize that data and to interact with users, to iterate on the visualization until they reach the work product that they need. This is something that only an agent can do, because at each step in this process, there are forks in the road. There are different choices that they could make, and making the right choices is what makes them powerful. So they understand users and they deliver outcomes. And one of the ways that you see this showing up is an agent, again, taking a directive, working through the incremental steps, figuring out the things they need to do to deliver the right outcome, and then validating that they've actually achieved their goal. So this is how it all fits together. On the left side here, we have MCP servers, and these wrap around the data sets and the important systems where you need to query the information in order to do the task. And so the first objective is to get information from the MCP servers and make sure that that's in Claude's context. And then on the right side, we have agents. These are different systems that can perform tasks on the user's behalf, and it's everything from personal assistants to bankers to, of course, our favorite, coding agents. And so this is MCP and agents in a nutshell. You get the information from the servers, you do useful things with the agents. Let's talk about what it takes to build smart and trustworthy agents. A lot of what we do at Anthropic is to figure out which model capabilities we need to advance in order to achieve the next level of powering agents and becoming reliable for that new tier of complexity. And so we're working on various frameworks or various model capabilities that power these agents. Just the ability to run an agent, the ability to do agent orchestration, asynchronous work, incredibly important for agents because in a lot of cases they're doing such complex tasks that the human shouldn't sit there and watch them do it. It's something where it should go off and do a lot of work, maybe for days, and then wake up the user and say, hey user, it's time to take the next step. Knowledge base integration is incredibly important. Knowledge bases are a bit distinct from MCP because this is sort of a pre-indexed set of information, for example, a knowledge graph or graph rag or even just RAG. And rich user interfaces. One of the most compelling features of our latest models is that they can produce beautiful React code to do data visualization, to create interfaces for interacting with the user, and they can do this as simply and as easily as delivering a response. So they're just tokens, they're just token output from the model, and yet you can use these to actually interact directly with the user without creating specific UI, going through the test process, going through design. You literally present the model with the user scenario and it creates UI in response. And finally, the ability to generate working, high-quality source code is, of course, critical because a lot of the time, a lot of the ways that agents will need to solve problems is actually to generate small programs, run them on the user's behalf, and then throw them away because they were just tokens out of the model. And so I think the upshot of this is that frontier models, like the Claude series, they have feedback loops with the frameworks that we build around these agentic capabilities. And when the models get better, the frameworks get better. When the frameworks begin to push the models to have better capabilities or to improve in these areas, you get this virtuous cycle between the frameworks and the agents. And I'm happy to say that our friends at AWS and Bedrock have perfect complements for each of these agentic capabilities that we're building in our models. So for agents, of course, the Anthropic agent in Bedrock, that's the great place to start. The Bedrock multi-agent orchestration framework is fabulous. There's some great thinking in there. It's definitely worth reading the documentation, getting inspiration, understanding a bit how you can start to build these org charts or these teams and fleets of agents. I think agent to agent is one of the most exciting developments now on top of MCP, which again is barely 6 months old. Asynchronous work, this is a perfect fit for Bedrock batch processing. If you have workloads that don't need to be extremely low latency, you can shift them to off-peak hours and save half the price of tokens, or whatever the exact price is. Hope I got that right. We're not going to hold them to that. Knowledge base integrations. Obviously, Bedrock knowledge bases is a great place to start for this. This is not a wheel that you want to reinvent yourself. And for rich UI, tools like Amazon Q for Business, which is a front end on top of the Claude models, and coding agents like Amazon Q for developers. This is a series of examples of the way that Anthropic and Bedrock are working together to deliver full stacks that can let people build trustworthy agents. So I lifted this screenshot directly from the Bedrock multi-agent orchestration documentation page. And I love it because it resonates with everybody. It is an org chart made of robots. So this is the general design pattern that we recommend people pursue when they're building agents. Whatever structure you might implement to have an organization of humans solve a problem, that's probably a great design starting point for building agents and agent fleets. All right, now we can talk a bit more about safety. There are several ways that AI can fail you. Hallucinations are a common feature of these models. They're things that we can reduce, but probably never drive to zero. The ability to jailbreak is a huge risk. If you're putting these models and the agents powered by them in front of users, some users may have malicious intent. They may attempt to jailbreak the model. They may try to get it to do or say things that you don't want associated with your customer-facing brand. unpredictability, just on not reliably doing the same thing. I got a great piece of advice from our head of research, Matt Bell, and he said, when I'm going to give a demo, even one that I'm really confident in, I run it 20 times to make sure that it does the same thing 20 times before I show it to people, because these are statistical models. And then finally, the opacity, the lack of being able to understand why the model did what it did, to show the audit trail. So at Anthropic, we're working towards reducing or mitigating each of these core types of AI harms. And the reason we're doing this is to prop up that third pillar of building these trustworthy agents, to make sure that when you do put them in the field, when you give them important tasks, that you can rely on them, that they'll do things predictably, that they can be steered, and as we continue to develop the field of interpretability, that we can begin to understand at a fundamental conceptual level how they're stringing together the concepts and why they're doing what they're doing. So at Anthropic, we're on the exponential. And one of the things that I'm proudest of the company and that I think is most exciting is that we're a relatively young company in this field. We're barely over 4 years old. And very quickly, we came onto the scene with the Claude series, the Claude 3 model, which was sort of our first really excellent fit-for-purpose model. And in very short order, we have caught up with and begun to lead the frontier. And so this slide, as you can see, we move very fast. It's a tiny bit out of date. It doesn't have Claude 4 over on the right side. But if you just simply step back a bit and you look at the rate of our exponential progress in model intelligence, I think it's fair to say that we are moving at least as fast as, if not faster than, the rest of the field. And so if you see two exponential curves and one is faster than the other, there's a pretty clear signal of how that's going to play out. So there's another feature that is one of my favorites that I want to talk a little bit about, which is citations. Citations does what it says. It's the ability to ask the model to cite its sources, to cite specific sequence of tokens from the input context in the output. And this is a way to answer the question, how do you know? And this is something that has dogged AI since the very beginning of the LLM generation. When it produces a response, the first question is, how much can I trust this? And with the use of citations, you can trust it as well as the input data. Now, that doesn't mean the input data is good, but it does mean that token for token, word for word, what was in that input prompt will be delivered in the output response. We've also done a lot of work to make sure that models are honest. And one attribute of honesty is that it's very difficult to trick them into lying to you. You can't sort of put pressure on them to say something that the model knows at an essential level to be false. And this is something that we've been leading the field in and we expect to continue to lead on. This is another element of sort of leading the field in minimizing jailbreak risk, and again, just driving all of these things as close to zero as we can. And this is more than an abstract idea. Safety is not simply things like not helping people create anthrax. It's also things like being trustworthy not to engage in terrible behavior, again, with your brand out in the field. And so the inverse of safety, when you're building agents to support your company, is liability. The absence of safety is an increase in liability, and that's why this is so important. And so if you're hoping to make a case to folks who are the stakeholders for these projects, safety and liability are the two sides of this coin that it's important to reinforce. So our vision for all of this is that in the ancient history of 2024, Claude was an excellent assistant. It was helping people think through problems and think through tasks. And today, in 2025, Claude is collaborating with people side by side. But because these models are becoming exponentially smarter over time, we believe that in very short order, Claude will be pioneering. These agents will be able to ingest and synthesize and process so much data that they'll create insights, they'll create research breakthroughs, they'll create new business strategies. And so it's a very exciting time to be observing this process in real time, and we hope that you'll join us on this journey with Claude. Back to Ben.
That's right.
There you are, mate. Cheers. Whoop. There we are.
Hopefully I won't be checking on Claude for anthrax anytime soon, but we'll try and avoid that. Just for some closing thoughts, when we look and think about how Anthropic and Amazon Bedrock are working well together, I'm going to loop back to the core of what we started the conversation around. The strength of your data, the trust, the policies, the way in which you think about your team, and the responsible and security that you have within those models are all critical. And so it's not always as simple as it sometimes can see, especially when I hear customers explaining this to their management, their board, the people that they are beholden to around the ways in which they're thinking about scaling, trialing, experimenting, or piloting with agentic technology. But what we do understand, or we do emphasize, is the core is understanding the use case, understanding what the benefit and the end state will be for your business in terms of how that will grow and benefit your customers, and then doing it in a scalable, secure way to make sure that as you grow and as your POC moves to production and moves to scale, you have confidence all the way through. But what we've talked about today is a little bit of today and a little bit of the future. But what does the future of agentic AI look like? And as Eric just articulated, the scale of those exponential curves is continuing to lift. And so the potential or the limits of agentic technology today are not the limits of what agentic technology will be in a week, in a month, in 6 months. And as one of my leaders has been talking to me about, the mental model shift between generative AI and the concept that you think about creation or generation, and the move to agentic, where you think about action or getting to an outcome, is a fundamental mental model change that every organization is going to need to go through, not just today, but over the next few years. And so I really encourage, as you think about that, to think about that mental model shift. And just to spark some of those ideas, the concept around the future. What could it be? What do we see? The idea of multi-agentic systems, or the framework of how those agents will play together. How do you build a happy family? How do you build an organizational structure? How do you think about agents as humans within that structure and how they perform together? The concept around hyper-personalization. What does it feel like, and how do your customers feel, or the businesses feel, as hyper-personalization becomes something that might be behind a wall of glass for those customers? I really like advanced memory, and the reason why I like advanced memory is we think about generative AI in terms of a task that is performed, and sometimes we think about agents in terms of going to do or solve a problem. But if you think about agents that perform over a very long period of time, what happens when they gain or keep all that knowledge and they begin to iterate and improve on the outcomes over very long periods of time? You suddenly have agents that continue to improve. They continue to look at the outcomes you're trying to achieve. And you get to a really interesting place where you often have agents that will become differentiated at a task over a long period of time based on user input. And then finally, the hybrid. How do humans and agents interact? Where do they play? Where do you sit on the loop? Do you sit in the loop? How does that change over time? How do you increase the observability of the changes that you're making within your organization to give yourself and your stakeholders comfort on how those changes are occurring? So all that being said, I'm incredibly excited. When I talk to customers, this is the place where it sparks the most joy. So hopefully you've got a couple of questions, a couple of answers, a couple of things to take away. And I want to thank you so much for your time, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your evening. Thank you so much, everyone.